and watering down of the actual music out there. So,
no doubt. And they get hold of the youth real easy and make them learn these little singy-songy chorus.
Right. And we're not going to name any names, but I mean, again,
the names are too long to mention. We'll be on here till tomorrow.
We'll be on here for till the next inauguration, right?
Yeah. But another thing, see the difference. I agree with you on that, but the difference between hip hop and that is that was very much like, you know, a lot of those spirituals songs were, you know, singing about when we die we'll get to go to heaven. When we die, not while we're here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was a way to, like, let's survive. Let's try to not shake the boat. Let's escape if we can. Hip hop is more rebellious. Again, it's more like a reggae rebel in the face. Like, nah, we're here for a reason, and we're gonna change it where we stand right now. It's got a little more Malcolm, a little more Panther in it.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
because it's about do it yourself. I mean,
and it's about do it yourself. You know, and also that's the spirit of the youth. Like, when you look in these school systems, and I challenge any listener to research the beginning of the public school system and the Board of Education. These institutions were set up by the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller Corporation, chartered by the U.S. Congress, in order to make good workers. In their own words, they said, we're not trying to make philosophers nor men of letters.
More effective and efficient workers.
Yeah, we just want to make workers. And so when these youth go into these schools, and I know I felt the same way too when I was young, I didn't know it, your spirit feels real restless. You're like, something's wrong, but I don't know what it is.
So you think
you open the history books or the whatever books, and there's no food for your soul in there. So the youth get real rebellious. So as the generations go on, you know, each younger generation is wilder than its last one. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So the youth, you know, from the 60s to now have gotten wild. You know, but it's and so hip hop helps in a way too. It helps you channel not only hip hop, music. I'll say music because at one time, you know, what happened to the John Coltrane's and the Dizzy Gillespie's and the Byrds. They took the music out of the school systems. So they're not, you know, these kids don't even have no access to horns and pianos and things anymore.
And I think hip-hop stands out in many people's minds, not just as a musical genre, but as a culture, is because as the young hip-hop generation of the late 60s and early 70s, their older brothers and their parents couldn't have access to the same schools as white people. So, you know, one thing was you wouldn't let my mom and dad get into this school of conservatory. You wouldn't let my mom and dad get in access and political power. So you wouldn't even let us get into the same clubs. So we're going to start our own thing. You know, we're gonna do our own thing.
Well, at the time, remember, it was supposed to be separate but equal, and it wasn't in a lot of cases.
It's never separate but equal.
But a lot of the time, that doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that the black schools were bad. Like, kids had a lot more manners in those days. People dressed different. And the most important thing
community was truly a community. It wasn't just
and the most important thing is that people have respect for the elders. That's what's lost right now in these cities. You know, and that's why when you look in these neighborhoods, everything is falling apart because crack came. And crack destroyed a whole generation of elders and started a whole nother path on the culture, whereas, like, the elders ain't nothing. They fell off. There's nothing to teach
And I dare say it even started as early as the late 60s with the heroin epidemic in New York and throughout the country.
That was the first.
That was the first major hit from 1967 to 77. That hit hard, and then because my mom unfortunately was a part of that, and then after that, crack just really blew off the top.
Crack was the tsunami of the neighborhoods. And another thing is, if you look, the most revolutionary cities in the 60s, Oakland, California, Chicago.
Shout out to the Black Panthers.
The 10 most revolutionary cities in the 60s and early 70s became the major ports for crack cocaine.
I wonder why.
I wonder exactly.
So we're going to get into more questions that are
relevant to music. Harvard Radio, man. I'm talking about philosophy, science.
We're going to get into it. This is only the beginning. This is the appetizer. You're listening to the Darker Side, WHRB 95.3 FM. I'm here with Azeem, the legendary Bay Area. He's actually more than Bay Area. He's international. International. So let me get into a little bit about your former group, Telefunken. Do you ever, talk to any of those guys, or are you trying to hook up with any of them, or?
Yeah, it's funny. Two members, some of the, that Telefunken, for those who don't know, was a band that I put together. It was the first group I put together, and it was basically myself with a jazz outfit called the Unknown Giants.
Right.
They definitely lived up to their name. They were all extremely, extremely talented.
Yes.
Some of them, again, as we were talking about with drugs and heroin and stuff, some of them fell off. But yeah, I have been in touch. People have moved on and are doing other things.
Right.
After Telefunken, I actually joined Spearhead and co-wrote and ghost-wrote for Michael Franti and toured with them for about 2 years and toured all over Europe.
Oh, that must have been amazing. Just traveling abroad, I know broadens your perspective, so I'm sure you learned so much.
Yeah. Well, I've been blessed because my mother, when I was coming up, used to work for the airlines. She used to work for Eastern Airlines and Continental.
Cool.
She had like a
shout out to your moms.
For real. And that was the time when it was a lot easier to fly. Like, it was before the buddy passes. Like, she used to get stacks of free tickets for the year and put our names on it. So ever since I was young, I was able to fly around. We would go to Jamaica every summer, Barbados, all kind of Panama.
You probably bring home all those fresh dub tapes back to the Bay. They were like, oh, what's that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
was still young. The thing is, too, I didn't really get it. I became a musician. It was either between musician and actor. My older brother actually was like, I'm going to be an actor. So I chose to be a musician because at the time, I was like, well, I don't want to compete against my big brother.
Right,
so he's going to be an actor. I'm going to be a musician. And we was like, I'll meet you at the top.
Right.
And we've both been kind of on this journey ever since.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let me ask you also, because we talked a little bit about, your music, but a lot of people may or may not know, Azeem, that you are an author as well, and you have 2 books. So maybe I wanted to get into, I do want to get into what compelled you to start writing, and what, I'm sure.
Well, there's a lot of answers to that question, but I think I'll say this, is that my mother was bougie, but not in a church-going bougie. She didn't go to church, I don't think, ever once in her life, but she was. She considers herself a very classy woman.
Okay.
Like, so all my, I dropped out. First of all, I dropped out of school in 7th grade.
Okay.
I'd been back a few other times, but I've never graduated from any, not even 8th grade, not high school, none of that.
Right.
But my mother was constantly reading. She used to read, even at red lights, she'd break her book out.
Wow.
And she was constantly correcting our language. I couldn't even say ain't. That ain't, she'd say ain't a word.
Yeah.
And she'd make me say it over
again. Right.
So she's very particular with the language and with words. And when I started to get in trouble a lot, I started to realize that when I spoke proper, the way my mother, persistently taught me, I would get out of trouble. You know what I mean? I didn't sound, and so I started to use that to my advantage. So I think at a really early age, I learned that words applied properly can have, effect, and that there's a psychology behind words and the application of them.
That's amazing you mentioned that, because on the physical realm, again, this is Hope the Anointer, and the reason why I feel that I'm anointer is because I definitely deal with the spiritual realm a lot. And you talked a little bit about the psychology of words. Scripture talks about words. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Those who love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Even in Genesis 1, God spoke. There was light.
Hey, so in the beginning there was the Word.
Exactly. Yeah, that's in John. So you see the significance of words and how effective they can. And it seems that you really do appreciate, and most true MCs that I've talked to, whether it be Rakim or so-and-so, they all say the similar thing, that there's something about when the effective words are put together that you can really actualize reality. You can really create your reality by what you say.
I mean, listen, man, now we can dip into, ancient cultures and things where,
this is not new.
People were chanting